In a world where royal titles often feel distant and ceremonial, one woman transformed an entire kingdom's relationship with modern monarchy. Picture this: a young Palestinian refugee's daughter, born in Kuwait, who would one day stand before world leaders at the United Nations, challenging them to rethink education, women's rights, and social justice. This is not a fairy tale, though it might sound like one. This is the real story of how Rania Al Yassin became Queen Rania of Jordan, and how she revolutionized what it means to be royal in the 21st century. Before she wore a crown, she was debugging computer systems at Apple. Before she addressed global summits, she was a marketing coordinator trying to make ends meet. Before she became the voice of millions of voiceless women across the Middle East, she was just a young professional who happened to meet a prince at a dinner party and changed the course of history forever. What makes her story extraordinary isn't just the royal transformation, but how she refused to let tradition silence her voice, how she turned a palace into a platform for change, and how she proved that true leadership comes not from the throne you inherit, but from the bridges you build and the barriers you break. This is the story of a queen who tweets, a mother who fights for every child's right to education, and a woman who dared to redefine what royal service looks like in an age of social media, global connectivity, and urgent social change. From the corporate boardrooms of Amman to the corridors of power in Washington, from refugee camps to the halls of the United Nations, Queen Rania's journey reveals how one person's commitment to authenticity and action can reshape not just a nation, but inspire a generation worldwide. Get ready to discover the untold story behind the woman who made the world fall in love with Jordan, and who continues to prove that sometimes the most powerful crown is the one you earn through service, not birthright. The year was 1970, and the world was changing rapidly. While Neil Armstrong's footprints were still fresh on the moon, and the Beatles were recording their final album, a baby girl was born in Kuwait City who would grow up to reshape the Middle East's image on a global stage. Rania Al Yassin entered the world on August 31st to Palestinian parents who had fled their homeland during the turbulent years following the establishment of Israel. Her father, Faisal Sedki Al Yassin, was a pediatrician who had built a new life for his family in Kuwait after leaving Palestine. Her mother, Ilham Yassin, was a devoted homemaker who instilled in her daughter the values of education, compassion, and never forgetting one's roots. The Al Yassin household was one where dinner conversations often revolved around current events, social justice, and the importance of using one's privileges to help others. Growing up in Kuwait during the 1970s and 1980s meant living in a fascinating crossroads of cultures. The small Gulf nation was experiencing an oil boom that attracted people from across the Arab world and beyond. Rania's childhood was spent in this cosmopolitan environment, where she learned to speak Arabic, English, and French fluently. Her parents emphasized that education was the one thing no one could ever take away from her, a lesson that would prove prophetic given their family's history of displacement. As a young girl, Rania was known for her quick wit and natural leadership abilities. Her classmates at the new English school in Kuwait remember her as someone who could command attention not through force, but through her genuine interest in others and her ability to bring people together. She was equally comfortable discussing politics with adults and organizing playground activities with her peers. This natural charisma would later serve her well in royal duties, but during her childhood, it simply made her a beloved figure among her friends and teachers. The Al Yassin family maintained strong connections to their Palestinian heritage while embracing their life in Kuwait. Rania grew up hearing stories about her grandparents' olive groves and the villages they had left behind. These stories shaped her understanding of displacement, loss, and resilience. She learned that identity wasn't just about where you were from, but about carrying your values and culture wherever life took you. When Rania was in her teens, her academic excellence became increasingly apparent. She excelled in mathematics and science, showing a logical mind that could solve complex problems with ease. Her teachers noted that she had an unusual combination of analytical thinking and emotional intelligence. While she could navigate complicated equations, she was equally skilled at mediating disputes between classmates or organizing charity drives for less fortunate students. The decision to pursue higher education was never a question in the Al-Yassin household. Rania's parents had always made it clear that their daughter would attend university, and her academic record certainly supported ambitious goals. However, choosing where to study required careful consideration. The family wanted an institution that would provide excellent education while exposing Rania to different cultures and perspectives. After much deliberation, Rania chose the American University of Cairo in Egypt. This decision would prove to be pivotal in shaping her worldview and preparing her for a future role as a global advocate. Egypt in the late 1980s was a vibrant center of Arab intellectual and cultural life. The university attracted students from across the Middle East and beyond, creating a dynamic environment where ideas flowed freely and lifelong friendships were forged. At AUC, Rania majored in business administration with a focus on marketing and information systems. Her professors remember her as a dedicated student who brought fresh perspectives to classroom discussions. She was particularly interested in how technology could be used to solve social problems and how businesses could operate more ethically. These interests would later influence her approach to modernizing Jordan's educational system and promoting social entrepreneurship. University life also exposed Rania to the broader complexities of Middle Eastern politics and society. She participated in student organizations focused on Palestinian rights and women's empowerment. Her fellow students recall her ability to articulate complex political positions without alienating those who disagreed with her. This diplomatic skill would prove invaluable in her future role as a queen who needed to navigate sensitive international relationships while advocating for her beliefs. During her time at AUC, Rania also developed a deep appreciation for the power of communication and media. She studied how successful businesses and organizations crafted their messages to reach different audiences. She was fascinated by the emerging field of information technology and its potential to connect people across geographical and cultural boundaries. Little did she know that she would later become one of the first royals to effectively harness the power of social media to advance social causes. The young woman who graduated from the American University of Cairo in 1991 was confident, well-educated, and deeply committed to making a positive difference in the world. She had absorbed lessons about leadership, communication, and social responsibility that would serve her well in whatever career path she chose. However, like most college graduates, she had no idea that her life was about to take an extraordinary turn. Returning to Kuwait after graduation, Rania faced the reality that her home country was recovering from the devastating Gulf War. The Iraqi invasion had traumatized the nation and displaced many families, including some who had been friends and neighbors. This experience reinforced her understanding of how quickly life could change and how important it was to build strong, resilient communities. The job market in post-war Kuwait was challenging, and Rania began to consider opportunities elsewhere in the region. Her excellent academic record and fluency in multiple languages made her an attractive candidate for international companies operating in the Middle East. When an opportunity arose with Apple Computer in Amman, Jordan, she decided to take a chance on a new country and a new adventure. Moving to Jordan in the early 1990s felt like a homecoming of sorts for Rania. The kingdom had long been a haven for Palestinians and other displaced populations in the region. King Hussein, who had ruled Jordan since 1952, had built a reputation as a moderate leader who promoted peace and stability in a turbulent region. The country offered a blend of traditional Arab culture and modern aspirations that appealed to someone with Rania's background and values. At Apple's Amman office, Rania worked as a systems analyst and later moved into marketing coordination. Her colleagues remember her as someone who approached every project with enthusiasm and attention to detail. She was particularly interested in how technology could be made more accessible to Arabic-speaking users and how computers could be used to improve education in developing countries. These interests aligned perfectly with her personal values and would later influence her work in educational reform. Life in Amman in the early 1990s was exciting for a young professional like Rania. The city was experiencing growth and modernization while maintaining its historic character. She made friends easily and became part of a social circle that included young Jordanians and expatriates working in various industries. These friendships introduced her to different aspects of Jordanian society and helped her understand the challenges and opportunities facing the kingdom. It was through these social connections that Rania's life would take its most dramatic turn. In January 1993, she attended a dinner party that seemed like any other social gathering. The host had invited an eclectic mix of guests, including some members of Jordan's royal family. Among them was Prince Abdullah, the eldest son of King Hussein, who was then serving in the Jordanian military and pursuing various interests in technology and development. The prince was immediately drawn to Rania's intelligence and authenticity. Unlike many people who became tongue-tied or overly formal in his presence, she engaged with him as she would any interesting person at a party. They discussed technology, regional politics, and their shared concerns about education and social development. What struck Abdullah most was her genuine passion for making a positive difference in the world and her lack of interest in his royal status. For Rania, meeting Abdullah was equally memorable, though not because of his title. She found him to be thoughtful, well-informed, and committed to serving his country. Their conversation revealed shared values and compatible visions for how the Arab world could modernize while preserving its cultural identity. Neither realized that evening that they were beginning a relationship that would change both of their lives and impact millions of people across Jordan and beyond. Their courtship developed quickly but thoughtfully. Abdullah appreciated Rania's independence and strong opinions, while she admired his dedication to his country and his progressive views on women's roles in society. They discovered that they both believed in the power of education to transform lives and communities. They shared a vision of Jordan as a model for peaceful development and regional cooperation. As their relationship deepened, Rania began to understand what marriage to a prince would mean. She would be giving up her promising career in technology to take on royal duties and public responsibilities. More significantly, she would become a public figure whose every action would be scrutinized and whose words would carry far more weight than those of a private citizen. These prospects were both thrilling and daunting for someone who had always valued her independence and privacy. The decision to accept Abdullah's proposal was not made lightly. Rania consulted with her family, who expressed both pride and concern about their daughter's future. They knew she had the intelligence and character to succeed in any role she chose, but they also understood the unique pressures and constraints that came with royal life. Ultimately, they supported her decision, knowing that she would bring her own values and perspective to whatever challenges lay ahead. When their engagement was announced in 1993, many Jordanians were curious about the young Palestinian woman who had captured their prince's heart. Some wondered whether someone from outside Jordan could truly understand and represent their country's interests. Others were excited about the prospect of a modern, educated princess who might bring fresh energy to the royal family. What most people didn't anticipate was how completely Rania would embrace her adopted homeland and how effectively she would use her platform to advance causes that mattered to all Jordanians. The months leading up to their wedding were a whirlwind of preparation and public appearances. Rania had to learn about royal protocol while maintaining her natural warmth and accessibility. She studied Jordan's history, geography, and cultural traditions with the same dedication she had once applied to computer systems and business strategy. Most importantly, she began to understand how she could use her future position to advance the causes she cared most about, particularly education and women's empowerment. As 1993 drew to a close, Rania Al Yassin prepared to become Princess Rania of Jordan. She had no way of knowing that this transformation was just the beginning of a journey that would take her from the corporate world to the global stage, from private citizen to international advocate, and eventually to a throne that she would use not for personal privilege, but as a platform for change. The wedding ceremony on June 10, 1993, was a moment that captured the imagination of people throughout Jordan and the broader Arab world. Unlike many royal weddings that emphasize ancient traditions and formal protocols, Rania and Abdullah's celebration struck a balance between honoring Jordanian customs and reflecting their modern, accessible approach to public service. The bride's simple elegance and genuine warmth immediately endeared her to the Jordanian people, who saw in her someone who could bridge different worlds and perspectives. As Princess Rania began her royal duties, she faced the challenge of defining her role in a monarchy that had always been respected for its stability and moderation. King Hussein had ruled Jordan for over 4 decades, earning international acclaim for his diplomatic skills and his commitment to peace in the Middle East. Queen Noor, Abdullah's stepmother, had established herself as an advocate for architecture, urban planning, and cultural preservation. Rania needed to find her own path while complementing the work already being done by other members of the royal family. Rather than immediately launching into high-profile initiatives, Princess Rania spent her first years learning about Jordan's diverse communities and understanding the challenges facing different segments of society. She visited schools in remote villages, met with women's organizations and urban centers, and listened carefully to the concerns expressed by teachers, healthcare workers, and community leaders. These listening tours were not just ceremonial visits. They were genuine, fact-finding missions that would inform her future work. What struck Rania most during these early experiences was the stark inequality in educational opportunities across Jordan. While children in affluent neighborhoods of Amman had access to well-equipped schools and qualified teachers, those in rural areas often attended overcrowded classrooms with minimal resources. She discovered that many talented young people, particularly girls, were not pursuing higher education simply because their families couldn't afford it or because social expectations limited their opportunities. The more Rania learned about Jordan's educational challenges, the more determined she became to address them systematically. However, she also understood that effective reform required more than royal patronage and good intentions. She began studying successful educational initiatives from around the world, paying particular attention to programs that had achieved measurable improvements in student outcomes while respecting local cultural values. During this period, Rania also began to develop her distinctive approach to public communication. Unlike previous generations of royals who maintained formal distance from the public, she sought to create genuine connections with the people she served. She learned that authentic engagement required not just speaking to audiences, but listening to them and responding to their concerns in meaningful ways. This insight would later influence her groundbreaking use of social media and digital platforms. The birth of her first child, Prince Hussein, in 1994 added a new dimension to Rania's understanding of her role and responsibilities. Becoming a mother while serving as a princess gave her fresh perspective on the challenges facing Jordanian families. She experienced firsthand the concerns that all parents have about their children's education, health, and future opportunities. This personal experience strengthened her commitment to creating a Jordan where every child could reach their full potential. As Prince Hussein grew, Rania made deliberate choices about how to balance her public duties with her responsibilities as a mother. She insisted on being actively involved in her children's daily routines and education, rather than delegating these responsibilities entirely to nannies and tutors. This hands-on approach to parenting was unusual among royal families, but it reflected Rania's belief that children benefit from close relationships with their parents regardless of social status. The late 1990s brought significant challenges that tested both Rania's adaptability and her growing influence within Jordan. Regional conflicts, economic pressures, and social changes created new demands on the royal family's attention and resources. King Hussein's declining health also meant that Crown Prince Abdullah was taking on increasing responsibilities, which in turn expanded Rania's role in representing Jordan both domestically and internationally. During this period, Rania began to articulate her vision for Jordan's future more clearly and publicly. She spoke passionately about the need to invest in human capital, particularly in education and healthcare. She argued that Jordan's greatest natural resource was its people, and that developing their talents and abilities was essential for the country's long-term prosperity and stability. This message resonated strongly with Jordanians who took pride in their country's achievements despite its limited natural resources. Rania's growing public profile also attracted international attention. Foreign diplomats and journalists began to recognize her as a thoughtful and articulate spokesperson for moderate Arab positions on regional issues. She demonstrated an ability to explain complex Middle Eastern dynamics to international audiences while maintaining her credibility with Arab constituents. This skill would prove invaluable as regional tensions continued to escalate. The princess also began to leverage her background in technology and business to modernize royal communications and outreach. She understood that reaching younger generations required embracing new media platforms and communication styles. While maintaining appropriate dignity and protocol, she sought ways to make royal institutions more accessible and relevant to ordinary Jordanians' daily lives. In 1999, King Hussein's death marked a pivotal moment not just for Jordan, but for Rania personally. At age 37, Abdullah ascended to the throne as King Abdullah II, making Rania the youngest queen in the world. This transition came at a time of great uncertainty in the Middle East, with ongoing conflicts in neighboring countries and rising tensions between different religious and ethnic communities throughout the region. Queen Rania approached her new responsibilities with characteristic thoughtfulness and determination. She understood that being queen meant more than ceremonial duties and charitable patronage. In a region where royal families often symbolized either authoritarian rule or irrelevant tradition, she saw an opportunity to demonstrate how monarchy could serve as a force for positive change and social progress. Her first major initiative as queen was the establishment of the Jordan River Foundation, an organization focused on child welfare and family development. Rather than simply lending her name to existing programs, Rania insisted on creating an evidence-based approach to social services that could measure its impact and adjust its strategies based on results. The Foundation's programs addressed issues ranging from early childhood development to domestic violence prevention, always with an emphasis on empowering individuals and communities rather than creating dependency. The Foundation's work also reflected Rania's growing expertise in development theory and practice. She had spent years studying successful anti-poverty programs from around the world and consulting with international experts on effective approaches to social change. This preparation allowed her to launch initiatives that were both culturally appropriate and technically sound, avoiding the common pitfall of well-intentioned programs that fail to achieve their goals. As queen, Rania also had new opportunities to advocate for women's rights and gender equality within Jordan and throughout the Arab world. She carefully navigated the sensitive cultural and religious considerations involved in these issues, building coalitions that included traditional religious leaders alongside modern feminists. Her approach emphasized expanding opportunities for women while respecting family values and cultural traditions that remained important to many Jordanians. This balanced approach to women's empowerment reflected Rania's sophisticated understanding of social change. She recognized that lasting progress required broad consensus rather than imposed reform, and that effective advocacy meant building bridges rather than creating divisions. Her success in this area would later make her a sought-after voice on women's issues at international conferences and forums. The early 2000s also saw Queen Rania begin to engage more actively in international affairs. As regional conflicts intensified and global attention focused on the Middle East, her ability to articulate moderate Arab perspectives became increasingly valuable. She participated in international conferences on education, development, and conflict resolution, always emphasizing Jordan's commitment to peace, tolerance, and regional cooperation. During this period, Rania also began to develop her distinctive personal style and public presence. Unlike many public figures who rely heavily on stylists and image consultants, she maintained an approachable authenticity that resonated with diverse audiences. Her fashion choices reflected both international sophistication and respect for local customs, while her speaking style combined intellectual rigor with emotional warmth. The Queen's growing international profile also created new opportunities to promote Jordan's interests and image abroad. She became an effective advocate for increased international investment in Jordan's economy and education system. Her credibility with international leaders and media outlets helped counteract negative stereotypes about Arab countries and demonstrated that the region included progressive voices committed to peace and development. Perhaps most importantly, Queen Rania's work during these formative years established patterns and principles that would guide her later initiatives. She demonstrated that effective royal service required deep knowledge of the issues being addressed, genuine engagement with affected communities, and willingness to challenge conventional approaches when necessary. She also showed that traditional institutions could adapt to modern challenges without losing their essential character or effectiveness. By the mid-2000s, Queen Rania had established herself as one of the most influential and respected members of Jordan's royal family. Her initiatives were producing measurable results in education and social services. Her advocacy was gaining international recognition, and her partnership with King Abdullah was strengthening Jordan's position in a turbulent region. However, her most significant contributions to Jordan and the broader world were still to come, as new technologies and global challenges would create unprecedented opportunities for a queen who understood the power of authentic communication and evidence-based action. The mid-2000s marked a transformational period for Queen Rania as she expanded her influence beyond Jordan's borders and embraced emerging technologies to amplify her message of education reform and social progress. As regional conflicts continued to dominate international headlines, she recognized an opportunity to present a different narrative about the Arab world, one that emphasized hope, innovation, and positive change rather than division and despair. Queen Rania's decision to join social media platforms in 2008 was revolutionary for a member of any royal family, but particularly significant for an Arab queen. While other world leaders were still debating the appropriateness of engaging directly with citizens through digital platforms, Rania launched her Twitter account and began sharing her thoughts, experiences, and advocacy messages in real time. This move was initially met with skepticism from traditional royal protocol advisors, but it quickly proved to be one of her most effective tools for global engagement. Her approach to social media was characteristically thoughtful and strategic. Rather than using these platforms solely for official announcements or ceremonial updates, Queen Rania shared personal insights, responded directly to citizens' concerns, and engaged in substantive discussions about policy issues. She posted photos from her visits to schools and community centers, shared articles about education reform and social justice, and used her growing online following to highlight the achievements of young Jordanians and Arabs who were making positive contributions to their communities. The authenticity of Queen Rania's digital presence immediately distinguished her from other political and royal figures who maintain more formal, distant relationships with their online audiences. She acknowledged criticism constructively, admitted when she didn't have all the answers to complex questions, and demonstrated genuine curiosity about different perspectives on the issues she cared about. This approach earned her millions of followers and established her as one of the most influential voices on Arab social media. During this same period, Queen Rania launched one of her most ambitious and successful initiatives, the Madrasati Palestine program. Recognizing that Palestinian children in refugee camps and underprivileged communities often lacked access to quality educational facilities, she mobilized resources to rebuild and upgrade schools throughout Palestinian territories. The program went beyond simple construction projects to include teacher training, curriculum development, and community engagement components that address the root causes of educational inequality. The Madrasati initiative demonstrated Queen Rania's sophisticated approach to international development and her deep understanding of the Palestinian situation. Rather than imposing external solutions, the program worked closely with local communities to identify their specific needs and priorities. Teachers, parents, and community leaders were involved in every stage of planning and implementation, ensuring that new schools would be sustainable and responsive to local conditions. The success of Madrasati also reflected Queen Rania's ability to build international partnerships and mobilize diverse funding sources. She secured support from governments, international organizations, and private foundations across the globe, demonstrating that Palestinian education was not just a regional concern, but a global humanitarian priority. Her presentations to potential donors combined emotional appeals with detailed project plans and accountability measures, showing that investments in Palestinian schools would produce measurable improvements in children's lives. As the program expanded to include over 100 schools across Palestinian territories, Queen Rania began to document and share its lessons with education reformers in other countries. She recognized that the challenges facing Palestinian children, while unique in some ways, shared common elements with educational inequalities experienced by marginalized communities worldwide. The methodologies developed through Madrasati could be adapted and applied to serve children in Jordan, other Arab countries, and beyond. Queen Rania's growing expertise in education policy also led to increased involvement in international forums and organizations focused on global development goals. She joined the board of the United Nations Foundation and became a prominent advocate for achieving universal primary education, one of the key Millennium Development Goals established by the international community. Her contributions to these discussions were valued not just because of her royal status, but because of her practical experience implementing successful education programs. Her speeches at international conferences during this period revealed a sophisticated understanding of the connections between education, economic development, and social stability. Queen Rania argued persuasively that investing in children's education was not just a moral imperative, but also the most effective strategy for promoting peace, reducing poverty, and building resilient societies. She supported her arguments with data from Jordan's own experiences and from successful education programs in other developing countries. The late 2000s also saw Queen Rania begin to address more controversial social issues, including women's rights and religious tolerance. She used her platform to challenge stereotypes about Islam and Arab culture, particularly misconceptions about the status and opportunities available to women in Muslim societies. Her approach to these sensitive topics was carefully calibrated to respect religious and cultural traditions while advocating for expanded opportunities and greater equality. One of her most effective strategies for addressing women's issues was highlighting the achievements of successful Arab women in various fields. Through her social media platforms and public appearances, Queen Rania regularly featured scientists, entrepreneurs, artists, and activists who were breaking new ground and challenging traditional gender roles. These profiles served multiple purposes. They provided positive role models for young girls, countered negative stereotypes about Arab women, and demonstrated that gender equality and cultural authenticity were not mutually exclusive. Queen Rania's advocacy for women's empowerment also included concrete policy initiatives within Jordan. She supported legal reforms that expanded women's access to education and employment opportunities, while also working to change social attitudes that limited women's participation in public life. Her approach emphasized gradual, sustainable change that built consensus rather than imposing reforms that might trigger backlash or resistance. During this period, Queen Rania also began to explore the potential of technology and innovation to address social challenges in Jordan and throughout the developing world. She became an early advocate for digital literacy programs that would prepare young people for the knowledge economy of the 21st century. Her background in technology, combined with her understanding of Jordan's economic needs, made her a compelling spokesperson for increased investment in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. The Queen's interest in innovation extended beyond formal education to include support for entrepreneurship and social enterprise. She recognized that Jordan's limited natural resources meant that the country's future prosperity depended on its ability to develop knowledge-based industries and create value through innovation rather than resource extraction. Her advocacy helped attract international investment in Jordan's technology sector and encouraged young Jordanians to pursue careers in fields like software development, biotechnology, and renewable energy. Queen Rania's growing international profile during this period also created new opportunities to advocate for Jordan's interests and to promote greater understanding between the Arab world and Western countries. Her fluency in multiple languages and her ability to communicate complex ideas clearly made her an effective cultural ambassador who could explain Arab perspectives to international audiences while also sharing global best practices with Arab communities. The 2008 global financial crisis created new challenges and opportunities for Queen Rania's advocacy work. As economic pressures mounted throughout the region, she argued forcefully that investments in education and social services were more important than ever. She contended that countries that continued to develop their human capital during difficult economic times would be better positioned to benefit from eventual recovery and growth. This message resonated particularly strongly in Jordan, where the combination of regional instability and global economic pressures created significant challenges for ordinary families. Queen Rania's advocacy helped maintain political support for education spending even as other government programs faced budget cuts. Her ability to articulate the long-term economic benefits of education investments helped convince policymakers that these expenditures were essential rather than optional. The Queen's work during the late 2000s also included increased attention to early childhood development and family support programs. Her own experiences as a mother of 4 children gave her personal insight into the challenges facing Jordanian families, and her study of international research convinced her that interventions during children's earliest years could have enormous impact on their later educational and social outcomes. The Jordan River Foundation's programs expanded during this period to include parenting education, nutrition support, and early learning opportunities for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. These initiatives were designed based on scientific research about child development, but they were implemented in ways that respected Jordanian cultural values and family structures. The combination of evidence-based programming and cultural sensitivity became a hallmark of Queen Rania's approach to social policy. As the decade drew to a close, Queen Rania had established herself as one of the most influential advocates for education and social justice in the Middle East and beyond. Her innovative use of technology, her evidence-based approach to program development, and her ability to build international partnerships had created new possibilities for addressing persistent social challenges. However, the most significant tests of her leadership and advocacy skills were yet to come, as regional upheavals would soon create unprecedented challenges and opportunities for progressive voices throughout the Arab world. The foundation she had built during these crucial years, both in terms of institutional capacity and international relationships would prove invaluable as she navigated the complex challenges of the following decade. Her commitment to transparency, accountability, and genuine engagement with diverse communities had earned her credibility that would be essential during periods of regional crisis and transformation. The Arab Spring that began in late 2010 presented Queen Rania with perhaps the greatest challenge and opportunity of her reign. As popular movements swept across the Middle East and North Africa, demanding greater political participation, economic opportunity, and social justice, Jordan faced its own pressures for reform while trying to maintain the stability that had long been its hallmark. Queen Rania's response to this regional transformation would define her legacy and demonstrate the full extent of her influence as a progressive voice in a turbulent region. Unlike some royal families who retreated from public engagement during periods of political uncertainty, Queen Rania chose to increase her visibility and advocacy during the Arab Spring. She recognized that the popular movements reflected legitimate grievances about inequality, corruption, and lack of opportunity that she had been working to address throughout her reign. Rather than viewing the protests as threats to royal authority, she saw them as validation of the reform agenda she had been promoting for over a decade. Queen Rania's social media presence became even more important during this period as traditional media struggled to keep pace with rapidly evolving events. Her Twitter account became a crucial source of information and perspective for millions of Arabs who were trying to understand the implications of the changes occurring throughout their region. She used her platform to advocate for peaceful reform, to highlight positive developments in Jordan, and to counter extremist voices that sought to exploit regional instability. Her approach during the Arab Spring demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of social change that she had developed through years of practical experience. Queen Rania emphasized that sustainable political progress required more than just removing unpopular leaders. It demanded building institutional capacity, strengthening civil society, and creating economic opportunities that could support democratic governance. Her message resonated with many Arabs who were enthusiastic about political change but concerned about the chaos and violence that had accompanied transitions in some countries. The refugee crisis that resulted from conflicts in Syria and Iraq created unprecedented challenges for Jordan and new opportunities for Queen Rania to demonstrate international leadership. As hundreds of thousands of refugees streamed into Jordan, overwhelming the country's infrastructure and social services, Queen Rania became one of the most articulate advocates for international support and assistance. Her calls for aid were compelling not just because of her royal status, but because of her detailed knowledge of the humanitarian challenges involved and her ability to propose practical solutions. Queen Rania's approach to the refugee crisis reflected her long-standing commitment to evidence-based policy and international cooperation. She worked closely with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and other international organizations to document the scope of Jordan's refugee population and to develop comprehensive response plans. Her advocacy helped secure billions of dollars in international assistance and established Jordan as a model for how host countries could manage large refugee populations while maintaining social stability. The refugee crisis also provided Queen Rania with new opportunities to advocate for education access and women's rights. She argued forcefully that refugee children must not become a lost generation, and she worked to ensure that Syrian and Iraqi children in Jordan could continue their education despite their displacement. The programs developed to serve refugee students became laboratories for innovative educational approaches that benefited both refugee and Jordanian children. Her work with refugee women revealed new dimensions of the challenges facing displaced populations. Queen Rania discovered that many refugee women had been professionals and community leaders in their home countries, but were struggling to find ways to contribute meaningfully to their new communities. She developed programs that recognized and utilized refugee women's skills and experience creating opportunities for them to support their families while also contributing to Jordan's development. During this period, Queen Rania also expanded her international advocacy to address the root causes of regional instability and displacement. She became a prominent voice calling for renewed international efforts to resolve conflicts in Syria, Iraq, and other troubled regions. Her arguments emphasized that military solutions alone could not create lasting peace, and that sustainable stability required addressing the economic and social grievances that fueled conflicts. The mid-2010s also saw Queen Rania launch new initiatives focused on countering violent extremism and promoting religious tolerance. As groups like ISIS gained international attention through their brutal tactics and sophisticated propaganda, she recognized the urgent need for alternative voices that could articulate authentic Islamic values while rejecting extremist interpretations. Her background and credibility within Arab and Islamic communities made her an effective advocate for moderate religious perspectives. Queen Rania's counter-extremism work was particularly innovative in its use of digital platforms and youth engagement strategies. She understood that extremist groups were recruiting young people through social media and online propaganda, and she developed counter-narratives that could reach the same audiences with more positive and constructive messages. Her campaigns emphasized the Islamic values of compassion, justice, and community service while rejecting the violence and hatred promoted by extremist organizations. The success of these counter-extremism initiatives reflected Queen Rania's deep understanding of contemporary media and communication strategies. She worked with young Arab filmmakers, artists, and social media influencers to create content that could compete with extremist propaganda for the attention and loyalty of at-risk youth. These partnerships demonstrated her ability to adapt her advocacy strategies to changing technological and cultural environments. Queen Rania's growing international influence during this period also created new opportunities to shape global discussions about Middle Eastern issues. She became a regular participant in major international conferences and forums where her perspectives on education, women's rights, and regional stability were sought by policymakers and opinion leaders from around the world. Her contributions to these discussions were valued, not just because of her official position, but because of her practical experience and demonstrated expertise. The 2015 launch of the Global Partnership for Education demonstrated Queen Rania's ability to mobilize international cooperation around shared priorities. As a board member of this initiative, she helped secure commitments from donor countries and international organizations to increase investment in education throughout the developing world. Her advocacy emphasized that education was not just a development goal in itself, but also the foundation for achieving progress on other challenges like poverty reduction, gender equality, and conflict prevention. Throughout this period, Queen Rania also continued to balance her international responsibilities with her roles as a wife, mother, and citizen of Jordan. Her children were now teenagers and young adults, and she made sure to remain actively involved in their lives despite her demanding schedule. Her approach to parenting continued to reflect her belief that children, regardless of their circumstances, benefit from close relationships with parents who are engaged in meaningful work and committed to positive values. The challenges facing Jordan during the late 2010s require Queen Rania to demonstrate new forms of leadership and advocacy. Economic pressures, regional instability, and social change created complex demands that could not be addressed through any single program or initiative. Her response was to strengthen the institutions and partnerships she had built over the previous decades, while also exploring new approaches that could address emerging challenges. One of her most significant achievements during this period was the expansion of her educational initiatives to include vocational training and workforce development programs. Recognizing that not all young people would pursue university education, Queen Rania worked to create alternative pathways that could prepare them for productive careers in technical fields. These programs addressed a critical need in Jordan's economy, while also providing models that could be replicated in other developing countries. Queen Rania's advocacy during the late 2010s also included increased attention to mental health and social support services. The combination of economic stress, regional conflict, and social change had created new challenges for many Jordanian families, and she recognized that traditional approaches to social services needed to be updated and expanded. Her initiatives in this area reflected her understanding that effective social policy required addressing both the material and psychological needs of vulnerable populations. As the 2010s drew to a close, Queen Rania had demonstrated remarkable adaptability and resilience in the face of unprecedented regional challenges. Her ability to maintain her reform agenda while responding to crisis situations had strengthened her credibility both within Jordan and internationally. The institutional capacity and international partnerships she had developed provided a strong foundation for addressing whatever challenges the next decade might bring. The experience of navigating the Arab Spring and its aftermath had also deepened Queen Rania's understanding of the complex relationships between political, economic, and social change. Her advocacy had evolved to encompass not just specific issues like education and women's rights, but also broader questions about governance, civil society, and regional cooperation. This expanded perspective positioned her to play an even more significant role in shaping discussions about the future of the Middle East and the broader Muslim world. As Queen Rania entered the 2020s, she faced a world transformed by new challenges that tested every skill and insight she had developed over nearly 3 decades of public service. The COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, rising authoritarianism, and growing inequality created unprecedented demands for the kind of evidence-based, collaborative leadership she had spent her career perfecting. Her response to these global challenges would demonstrate the full maturity of her influence and establish her legacy as one of the most effective advocates for positive change in the modern Middle East. The coronavirus pandemic that swept the globe in early 2020 created immediate crises in education, healthcare, and economic stability that struck at the heart of Queen Rania's advocacy priorities. As schools closed throughout Jordan and the world, millions of children suddenly found themselves without access to the educational opportunities she had spent decades working to expand and improve. Her response was swift, innovative, and comprehensive, drawing on all the institutional capacity and international partnerships she had built over the previous decades. Within weeks of the pandemic's arrival in Jordan, Queen Rania had mobilized resources to create distance learning programs that could reach students throughout the country. These initiatives went far beyond simply broadcasting lessons on television or radio. They included interactive online platforms, printed materials for students without internet access, and support systems for teachers who were adapting to entirely new methods of instruction. The programs served as models for other countries struggling with similar challenges and demonstrated the value of the technological infrastructure and educational expertise that Jordan had developed under her leadership. Queen Rania's pandemic response also revealed new dimensions of her understanding of social inequality and public health. She recognized immediately that the crisis would disproportionately affect vulnerable populations, including refugees, rural communities, and families with limited economic resources. Her advocacy during this period emphasized that effective pandemic response required addressing these underlying inequalities rather than simply implementing uniform policies that might work well for privileged populations, but fail to reach those most in need. The economic disruption caused by the pandemic created new opportunities for Queen Rania to advocate for the kinds of social safety nets and economic reform she had long believed were necessary for creating more resilient societies. She argued that the crisis demonstrated the importance of investing in public services, supporting small businesses, and ensuring that all citizens had access to healthcare, education, and economic opportunities regardless of their circumstances. During this period, Queen Rania also expanded her use of digital platforms to maintain connections with communities throughout Jordan and the broader region. Her virtual town halls, online educational events, and social media campaigns reached larger and more diverse audiences than traditional in-person events had ever achieved. These digital innovations would prove to have lasting value even as pandemic restrictions were eventually lifted, permanently expanding the ways royal institutions could engage with citizens. The climate crisis that became increasingly urgent during the 2020s provided Queen Rania with new opportunities to demonstrate her ability to connect local and global challenges. Jordan's location in an arid region made it particularly vulnerable to rising temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and extreme weather events. Queen Rania's response emphasized that climate adaptation and environmental protection were not luxury concerns for wealthy countries, but urgent necessities for survival and development in vulnerable regions like the Middle East. Her climate advocacy built on the same evidence-based, collaborative approach that had made her education and social programs successful. She worked with scientists and policy experts to understand the specific ways climate change would affect Jordan, and she developed adaptation strategies that addressed both environmental and social challenges simultaneously. Her initiatives included water conservation programs that created jobs, renewable energy projects that reduced both carbon emissions and energy costs, and agricultural innovations that increased food security while protecting natural resources. Queen Rania's climate work also reflected her sophisticated understanding of international cooperation and development finance. She became an effective advocate for increased climate funding for developing countries, arguing that the international community had both moral and practical reasons to support climate adaptation in vulnerable regions. Her presentations to international climate conferences combined compelling personal stories with detailed policy proposals and budget projections, demonstrating that climate action was both urgent and achievable. The rise of authoritarianism and political polarization in many countries during the 2020s created new challenges for Queen Rania's advocacy of democratic values and human rights. As some regional leaders abandoned commitments to political reform and civil liberties, she maintained her support for inclusive governance and peaceful political change while adapting her strategies to changing political realities. Her approach emphasized building civil society capacity and supporting independent institutions rather than confronting authoritarian leaders directly. Queen Rania's work promoting women's rights during this period reflected her understanding that progress in this area required sustained effort and careful attention to changing cultural and political contexts. As some countries in the region imposed new restrictions on women's education and employment, she intensified her advocacy while also celebrating the achievements of women throughout the Arab world who continued to break barriers and challenge stereotypes. Her women's empowerment initiatives during the 2020s included new programs focused on economic opportunity and entrepreneurship. Recognizing that economic independence was often the key to women's broader social and political equality, Queen Rania supported microfinance programs, business incubators, and professional development initiatives that helped women start and grow successful enterprises. These programs created measurable improvements in women's economic status, while also demonstrating that gender equality could contribute to overall economic development. The educational challenges of the 2020s required Queen Rania to expand her reform efforts to address new issues like digital literacy, critical thinking, and global citizenship. As misinformation and conspiracy theories proliferated online, she recognized that traditional approaches to education needed to be updated to prepare students for a world where information was abundant but not always reliable. Her curriculum reform initiatives emphasized teaching students to evaluate sources, think critically about complex issues, and engage constructively with people who held different perspectives. Queen Rania's educational work during this period also included increased attention to teacher training and professional development. She understood that even the best curriculum reforms would fail if teachers were not prepared to implement them effectively. Her programs provided teachers with both technical training in new educational technologies and pedagogical support for student-centered learning approaches that encourage creativity and critical thinking. As Queen Rania entered her fourth decade of public service, her influence extended far beyond Jordan's borders to encompass global networks of educators, policymakers, and advocates working on similar challenges. Her participation in international organizations and forums had evolved from representing Jordan's interests to helping shape global agendas on education, development, and social justice. This expanded role reflected both her personal expertise and the respect she had earned through decades of effective advocacy and program implementation. The institutional legacy Queen Rania created through her various foundations and initiatives have become largely self-sustaining by the 2020s, with professional staff and established procedures that could continue their work regardless of political changes or leadership transitions. This sustainability reflected her commitment to creating lasting change rather than simply generating temporary improvements that might disappear when royal attention moved elsewhere. Queen Rania's personal evolution during her decades of public service had also been remarkable. The young business professional who had attended a dinner party in 1993 had become one of the most knowledgeable and effective advocates for social change in the contemporary world. Her ability to combine emotional intelligence with analytical rigor, to build coalitions across cultural and political divides, and to adapt her strategies to changing circumstances had created a model of leadership that transcended traditional categories. As she looked toward the future, Queen Rania remained committed to the same fundamental values that had guided her work from the beginning. The belief that every person deserved access to education and opportunity, that women's equality was essential for social progress, and that positive change was possible when people of goodwill worked together toward shared goals. However, her understanding of how to advance these values had become far more sophisticated and effective through decades of practical experience. The challenges facing Jordan and the broader Middle East in the 2020s were in many ways more complex than those Queen Rania had confronted when she first became queen. Climate change, technological disruption, political polarization, and economic inequality created interconnected problems that required coordinated responses from multiple institutions and stakeholders. However, the foundation of knowledge, relationships, and institutional capacity that she had built provided unprecedented resources for addressing these challenges. Queen Rania's story demonstrates that individual leadership can make a profound difference even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Her transformation from a corporate professional to a global advocate illustrates the power of combining personal authenticity with strategic thinking, evidence-based analysis with emotional intelligence, and local knowledge with international perspectives. Most importantly, her career shows that sustainable social change requires patience, persistence, and willingness to adapt strategies while maintaining commitment to fundamental values. As she continues her work into the 2020s and beyond, Queen Rania remains a powerful example of how traditional institutions can evolve to address contemporary challenges while preserving their essential character and effectiveness. Her legacy extends far beyond any specific program or initiative to encompass a broader demonstration that principled leadership, applied consistently over time, can create positive change that improves millions of lives and inspires others to pursue similar goals in their own communities and countries.